Hey everyone, it is Juice here. Clorinde has been out for a few days now, and I think everybody has had enough time to get their impressions on her and test her out in play. Before this lovely Electro Champion duelist released, I had made a video on Clorinde's potential biggest pros and cons. Now that I've not only covered her in a guide, but have had a chance to play her more thoroughly on my own account, I thought I'd ask the question: Clorinde's pros and cons. Was I right or wrong? My name is Juice, and let's get into it. So firstly, I want to address this point as it is the most important in my opinion. How much better is Clorinde over these two, Yae Miko and Keqing? Now, value-wise, I stand by the sentiment that you don't really need Clorinde if you have one of the other two, or if you have both, then even more so. But is she a significant enough upgrade over the performance of these two? Here's the build cards of the Clorinde, Yae Miko, and Keqing being used for the showcase coming up in this video. We will use them in the official Kazuha-Nihida team core. I will do a silent showcase of these characters versus Triple Kenki. Then you yourself can decide who the winner is. Let's get into it. As you can see, Clorinde is really strong compared to these other two, but whether the difference is significant enough for you to pull is for you to decide. Personally, I think she will gain more value once Imaginarium Theater drops, but I think I stand by my original point in the pros and cons from the perspective of account value. I praised how cheap Clorinde's teams are. I think this is debatable because you want Official's constellations, ideally, and a couple of other 5 stars to make her work. But to me, Clorinde is still very free-to-play friendly, as she wants 5-star units that most free-to-plays will have or want, like Nihida and Kazuha, and both of these units have directly free substitutes in Dendro main character for Nihida, and you also have the free option of Lynette instead of Kazuha as well. So that does hold true, and I do stand by the fact that she doesn't need a Hydro in order to get going. Plus, you can also craft the free-to-play friendly option, Finale of the Deep, for her, and that gets her going perfectly fine. However, whenever it comes to Thundering Fury, the main artifact set that I sold on her in both my pros and cons and guide, I do still think it's the best on her in Aggravate. I perhaps underestimated Harmonic a bit, as you can use Harmonic in all of her teams and get her a highest personal DPS. While I still recommend Thundering Fury first and foremost because she is an Aggravate carry primarily, if you're a Hypercarry player or you want to play Overload more or any of her other teams, then don't sleep on Harmonic because it's going to work in all of her situations, meaning you don't have to farm 2 separate sets in that scenario. So for that reason, it can be more flexible. I said that she's relatively easy to pilot, and yeah, I still think that holds true. She's fairly intuitive, her combos are not that difficult as I went over in my guide. I'd say she's fairly straightforward and you can understand the gist of her pretty well, not to mention she's very quick-paced and fast, and I really enjoy her playstyle just on a personal basis. But when it comes to your teammates as well, I find her easy to pilot because if you can find yourself not really being able to play this team, that's fine. You can always swap out someone like Nihida for someone like Baiju, or better yet, you can even go for Kirara if you're a free-to-play. So there are defensive options that are available for Clorinde as well, so that also leans into her being, easy enough to use. So yes, people who play Genshin Impact on an ancient iPad, how do you have the storage for this game on iPad? And even older Nokia phone users, Clorinde should be fine for you to use. She's intuitive enough. I'm sure she'll be fine on mobile. Just make sure that you're not running into enemy hits. So whenever it came to my pros and cons, I said that Hypercarry buffers would not be the best for Clorinde because of the type of buffs that she prefers due to how they're added in the damage formula. However, I will say that I was fairly wrong about Kujou Sara, actually. Sara is quite good with Clorinde, especially in Hyper if you're playing with Yun-jin instead of Nihida. If I can find her here, there she is. I kind of underestimated Hyper Clorinde on the whole. I thought you'd need at least C1 R1 for it to be worth your time just at all, but no, C0 R1 is actually already enough to justify it. Now, I don't really consider myself wrong with Chevreuse, and this is because she really does just work in air quotes. At least Chev's team is unit efficient in the sense that you typically don't have to use any important units, no hydros or animos. Second half will be easy as ever to build. So when it comes to those two buffers that I highlighted in my pros and cons, Sara, actually pretty good. After all, she still gives you 60% crit damage for your electro attacks at C6. That is substantial for Clorinde. However, Chevreuse, she does make Overload work, but I'd say I rated her fairly. She's also very flexible teams-wise, and this is a pro that I mentioned in my pros and cons, but she's more than I thought, actually. Previous points hold true when it comes to the substitutable nature of her teams. Yun-jin existing in the meta for once is very refreshing. I'm definitely going to be leveling her up on my personal account now, which makes me really happy as Yun-jin's one of my favorite designs, actually. I just never had a reason to level her up. Fun fact, 2.4 was my favorite Genshin Impact patch. I'd also like to quickly correct my guide. This is Hypercarry Clorinde. I had Nihida instead of Kujou Sara here, but traditionally, this is how you can run it. And if you do run Nihida instead of Kujou Sara, then swirling is going to be quite difficult for you. You can do it, but then you would have to prioritize not using Clorinde's burst, which is a bit of a sacrifice because her burst is quite good. So hopefully that makes up for that mistake. And you should be able to form a team for her out of anything, honestly. Just make sure that your official is solid, especially if you're interested in the Aggravator archetype, since if you're not playing Hyper, she will be the main meshing cog in the machine. Okay, so I had a little bit where I mentioned that she's good for travel. Okay, she's not just good for travel, she's so fun. Look at her go! Yo, look at her go! She's dashing around. So yeah, I do in fact consider her travel and her lunging to be very fun. So yeah, she's like decent for overworld. And if you have Yelan in your team, then you can also go even faster. You can have, like, Janyon with you as well. It wouldn't be a very functional team, mind you, but that would just be pure overworld exploration, but you could get something fun out of it. I'll even just show you guys what I mean. Okay, now my Shanyon's C2, so I'll only use one of her jumps, but first you do this, then you do this, wait for that duration to end, and then you do this. You never have to sprint again to get anywhere. Literally the taxi team. Another con that I'd mentioned is that she's not field flexible, but I kind of see this as a pro now, and hear me out on that. One of Yae's biggest issues was how long her field time is, making it super hard to justify putting her anywhere other than her best in slot teams, because she was a sub DPS before, but because her field time is so long, DPS her or go home. And when it comes to Keqing, yes, she has a short field time, but she's more about the Electro application as opposed to the personal DPS. She's very quick swappy in nature. And Clorinde's uptime isn't even that egregious, and the durations of Aggravate's team buffs are more than enough for her to capitalize on, like Nihida's burst duration, Kazuya's swirl, and Fischl's Oz duration if we're going off of her best in slot team. This is only negative if you want to one-rotate bosses, and her DPR is, yes, very low, because she just does a bunch of quick fire rotations. That still holds true for my pros and cons. But surprisingly, her being able to one-rotate becomes a lot more feasible, even just with C1R1 because her high investment is that good. Even so, this matters for like 1% or less of the community. She can still clear comfortably. Relax, buddy. I'd say my predictions for Clorinde were mostly accurate, with some things being a little better than I thought, or worse, but roughly within that ballpark. I myself am happy with how Clorinde turned out performance-wise, and while I have a video coming soon on other issues I have with Clorinde, stay tuned for that one, my final solid thoughts on her in terms of mesa is that she's a good DPS pickup that, while not being an absolute must-pull, is very competent at what she does. Hopefully this video was able to help you develop a more thorough opinion on Clorinde now that we've had some time to see what she's actually made of. This has been Juice, signing out. And now we have two electro nerds who like playing tabletop games.